Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart. Both books published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. Today we're going to be reviewing one of my favorite novels of all time, and that is The Great Santini by Pat Conroy. This book came out in 1976. And let's get into it. Let's start with the cover. You know, I love graphic design and cover illustration, so we always review those things first. And so, on one of my favorite books of all time is one of the weakest covers. This is it's a painting done by Wendell Miner. It's a good painting. Wendell Miner is a great illustrator. I just don't know if this book is really selling the book at all. It's of a military jacket hanging up on in a closet. I mean, I don't know if that inspires anybody to pick up the book. I just really don't. However, it's a best-selling novel, so what the fuck can you do? What the fuck do I know? On the back, we've got a picture of the author who looks like he's talking on a cell phone, but I know this picture was taken in 1976, so I don't think he was talking on a cell phone. He's just relaxing. The dude is relaxing. Oh, maybe he's drinking a wine glass. Oh, yeah, that's right. He's drinking some wine with he's got one hand behind his head and a wine glass that I thought was a cell phone. And it's probably the worst author photo I've ever seen. So let's give the overall packaging a goddamn, just a bad grade. What is a bad grade? I don't know. For one of my favorite novels of all time, too. What a shame. What a shame. Well, I don't blame Wendell Miner, because Wendell Miner has done some magnificent illustrations in his career. Okay, let's stop with the negative. Let's get to the positive. This book came out in 1976. It was a huge hit. It was the first massive hit for Pat Conroy, and he went on to write some magnificent books later, like The Prince of Tides, Lords of Discipline, more of my all-time favorite books. Just the guy is a phenomenal storyteller and writer. And his books are just layered with such allegory, depth, and meaning. I just love them. And characters straight out of a Stephen King novel. Just some of the most horrifying characters you're ever going to read about in fiction. In fact, Bull Meecham is the main guy. Now, if you watched the movie, Bull Meecham was played excellently by Robert Duvall. This was a really good movie, by the way. He is Colonel Bull Meecham, a Marine Corps fighter pilot. Actually, quite a decorated fighter pilot. Very, very well liked and very well known in the military community. Just a stand-up guy, if you were to ask anybody that knew him in the military. He was big. He's big, loud, brash, military to the core. In the opening scene, which is just a classic scene, he is in a stuffy party, like a real upscale sort of bar where everybody is just trying to be polite and nice. And him and his Marines are in there just being loud and obnoxious. And somebody comes up to him and says, "Stop being loud and obnoxious." And so what they do is they concoct this scheme, and it's absolutely one of my favorite comedic scenes in a book of all time, is they get some cans of mushroom soup out of the kitchen. They open them up and they put them in a way that they can. So anyway, one of them pretends to vomit in front of the crowd. He pretends to vomit up on stage in front of everybody. Remember, this is a really high class place, country club bar type place with everybody dressed nicely. And he gets up there and he vomits up in front of everybody. Vomits up this mushroom soup. That, I mean, they make it look like he's vomiting up these cans of mushroom soup, right? Mushroom soup look like vomit all over the stage. And then, to top it off, all the Marines grab their spoons and they swarm to the stage like hungry ants, and they they scoop up the vomit. Now, keep in mind, it's just mushroom soup. But they scoop it up and they eat it in front of everybody, and everybody's like, ah! The whole place is just a fucking, and then he gets, so anyway, Bull Meecham, that was actually supposed to be a very important party at a very important country club for some very high-ranking officers. And the fact that Bull Meecham and his dudes did that in front of everybody. Well, let's just say that Bull Meecham, he may or may not have gotten disciplined for that, but it's just absolutely hilarious. I loved it. That being said, that's about the only funny thing Bull Meecham does throughout the book, because he is a terror. He is a horror. He's got this family. Now, Bull Meecham goes on these journeys for the military that take him out of town, sometimes for 6 months at a time. And his family just lives in the military base on the house, just by themselves. And they have to move. They're a military family. They move every year to a different city. And the kids are getting sick of it. And the kids are Ben, who's 18, Marianne, Karen, and Matt. They range from 18 all the way to about 12 or whatever. But they know that as soon as their father comes back from his latest deployment, they're going to be uprooted out of Atlanta and taken who knows where. And they all really love living in Atlanta. They have made some great friends. And they talk about that, how that they've made, everywhere they've been, they've made these great friends, and then they make them for a year, year and a half, 2 years, and then they have to just move away and leave them. And the kids are like, it's worse than, they're like, this is worse than if I make a bunch of friends and they were killed or died. It's almost like they die. It's like I move away and those friends of mine that I loved are now dead. I'll never see them again. And their mom is trying to be reassuring. Oh, you'll see them again. We'll go back, blah, blah. And they're like, no, we'll never see them again because we've never went back. It's like every year we get to fall in love with new friends, and every year we get to watch them die. Just because we're moving away. We know they're alive. We know they're not really dead. But to us, they're dead. And their mom is really starting to see the pain that this lifestyle is causing their kids. Not only because of that, but because she knows her husband, Bull Meecham, the war hero, when he's alone with his family, he's actually a real brutal, psychological, verbally manipulative, physically dangerous tyrant. And he calls himself the Great Santini. Well, the Great Santini says, my kids must do this, 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 or they will be whipped, this, that, and the other. He rules them like a tyrant. So he comes back from his deployment and they have to load up again and they're moving to another town. And another one of the opening scenes is them in their car just driving to this new town, trying to have a discussion with their father about how much they don't want to leave, and he's like, this new town will be the best one yet. And he calls us, instead of calling his kids, he calls them sports fans. Hey, my sports fans. Hey, my sports fans. My sports fans. He never refers to them individually by name or anything. He's like, my little sports fans. It's just everything about him just seems distant and cold from the beginning. And then you can see as this conversation plays out as they're driving to their new home, which is in North Carolina or South Carolina, I can't remember. He just is not a good guy. He starts using the N-word. He starts talking bad about different races. His kids are trying to correct him. You can't speak like that, Dad. You need to be more, you need to be a nicer person. He's like, and he just amps it up. He doubles down on the bad speak. He doubles down on how much he hates other races and this and that and the other. And he's just, he's the type of guy who builds within his wife and kids these wild swings of emotion where he can get them to feel so horrible about themselves, but then once in a while he surprises them with something charming and nice. So he wins them back over, and then they're on this high plane for a while. But that doesn't last long because he will just bury them again with some horrific things that he says or does, or rules that he makes, or punishments that he doles out. And he just becomes this figure in the book where it's like a monster. He's worse than a monster. He's worse than Jaws. He's worse than Cujo. He's worse than anything that you've ever read in a Stephen King novel, because this guy is real. He's a force in his family, and he's a force in literature that just causes himself and everybody around him so much pain. You would hate him. We all would. But at the same time, you kind of admire the guy because when it comes to the military, he is so devoted and so driven to do the right thing by them that he's a hero. He's a warrior without a war, because this book takes place in this late 1970s, mid 1970s, where the Vietnam War is over. He's got no more wars to fight. The only wars he's got left to fight are those that he can conjure up amongst his children and his wife. And his wife just has no recourse. She just doesn't know how to leave the guy. And some of her kids just push, just leave. It's just one of those domestic dispute situations, those domestic, those guys that abuse, the abusive situations that are inescapable for some of these women. And the sad thing is, the man's a hero. He does heroic things in his fighter jet. He saves lives. He saved hundreds of lives. And that is where you're, at one time, you're horrified by this man, but at the other time, your admiration for this man. And it's almost like when Bull Meecham causes these wild swings in emotion between his family, he's also causing wild swings of emotion within the reader, because there are moments in the book where you're just like rooting for this guy because he is doing and saying things that are so correct and honorable and patriotic. And then when he gets home with his family, it's just like he turns into this man that you just don't want. His older son, who is kind of the main character, his older son Ben is 18, just wants to be a basketball player. I mean, just a simple, he just wants to be a basketball player. That's all. And he can't even do that correctly. Although he is doing it correctly by his dad's standard, he's a failure at everything. It's an amazing character study of a family that's being abused and the abusive person abusing them. And it's partly biographical. Pat Conroy says at the end of this that, this was how I grew up. This was my family. And Pat Conroy actually went on to become a Army Ranger at West Point, I believe. He followed in his dad's footprints and went into the Army himself. The author did. So he and some of his future novels, like Lords of Discipline, talk a lot about that. But it's just an absolute dynamite book. One of those books you just can't look away from because it's a train wreck. Oh, Lord have mercy, is it a train wreck? Anyway, this is a 10 out of 10. Absolute 10 out of 10. If you want to read a family drama that's got a lot of just gripping scenes that just curl your toes, The Great Santini, or if that kind of thing triggers you, stay far, far away. I give this 10 out of 10. One of my favorite novels of all time.